Welcome back to the deep dive. We're going way back in time today to see how good manufacturing practices, GMP, transformed from, just like good intentions to the system we have today.
Yeah, it's a really interesting journey. We're going to see how early mistakes, scientific advancements, a growing awareness of risk all shaped the GMP landscape. That we know today.
Right. So we've got a ton of sources here. We've got legal documents like the CFR. We've got industry manuals, research articles, even some YouTube videos from training sessions.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. All these sources, they reveal this kind of pattern. Every historical event, like a quality failure or a new scientific understanding, it always seems to push for improvements. In facilities, training, documentation, all the things that make sure we get safe and effective products.
So we're on a mission here. We want to highlight those key moments
Uh-huh.
and see how they influenced everything from facility design to like international regulations.
Exactly. And you might be surprised by some of the early focuses, like sanitation in the early 20th century. That was a huge concern.
Yeah, I noticed that in some of the older documents, like they use terms like filth, insects, even larvae when they're talking about potential contaminants. Not very appetizing.
Yeah, it's a reminder of how different things were back then. Foodborne illnesses were a much bigger problem, and the connection between sanitation and safety wasn't as well established.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what were some of the early steps taken to address those sanitation concerns?
Well, one really pivotal moment was the 1906 Pure Food and Drugs Act. It was groundbreaking legislation that laid the foundation for modern food and drug regulation.
I've heard of that, but refresh my memory. What did it actually do?
Well, its main goal was to prevent the adulteration and misbranding of products. So basically making sure that what's on the label is actually in the product
Yeah.
and that it's free from things like, well, those insect larvae you mentioned.
Right, so it was about bringing some standards to an industry that was, at times, kind of like the Wild West.
Exactly. And one kind of interesting detail I found in the CFR Title 21, Part 110, was the definition of water activity.
Water activity. What's that all about?
So it's a measure of how much free moisture is in a food product, and it directly relates to how susceptible that food is to microbial growth. So higher water activity means more risk of spoilage and foodborne illness.
So even back then, they were already thinking about the scientific details of how to keep food from going bad.
Absolutely. So these early regulations, while they might seem kind of basic by today's standards, they were a really big step towards protecting public health.
Okay, so we've got this focus on basic hygiene. I'm guessing GMP didn't stay focused on just that for very long, did it?
You're right. As science and manufacturing processes advanced, so did the scope of GMP. And unfortunately, there were some tragic incidents along the way that really forced the industry and regulators to kind of rethink things.
That's where things get interesting. Can you give us an example of one of these incidents?
One of the most tragic and pivotal ones was the sulfanilamide elixir tragedy of 1937. A pharmaceutical company was producing an elixir containing sulfanilamide, a really effective antibiotic at the time.
Okay, what went wrong?
Well, the company, trying to create a liquid form of the drug, dissolved it in diethylene glycol. It's a highly toxic solvent, and they distributed this elixir without doing proper safety testing. The results were devastating.
How devastating are we talking?
Over 100 people died, many of them children. It was a horrific tragedy, and it really sparked public outrage, and it revealed just how inadequate drug safety regulations were at the time.
So this tragedy must have been a major turning point in the evolution of GMP.
Absolutely. It directly led to the passage of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act of 1938. And this act really expanded the FDA's authority, requiring pre-market safety testing for drugs.
Wow, so before this, companies could essentially sell any drug they wanted without proving it was safe.
Basically, yeah. The 1938 Act was a real game changer. It made safety a top priority and established a much stricter regulatory framework.
Okay, so we've gone from basic sanitation to mandatory safety testing. But GMP didn't stop evolving there, right?
Not at all. The sulfanilamide tragedy was a huge wake-up call. But the story of GMP is one of, continuous improvement. And over the next few decades, the regulations expanded and became more comprehensive.
What were some of the things that pushed for these new regulations?
Well, several factors contributed. One was just the increasing complexity of drug development and the manufacturing processes. As drugs became more sophisticated, the potential for errors and risks also increased.
So it wasn't just about the ingredients themselves, but the entire manufacturing environment and how that could impact quality and safety.
Exactly. And this realization led to a shift in focus. from basic sanitation to more comprehensive considerations of facility design and the equipment used in the whole manufacturing process.
Okay, let's talk about facilities. What kind of changes did we see in facility design during this period?
One of the most significant changes was the emergence of clean rooms. And these controlled environments, remember how early regulations focused on preventing things like filth and insects? Clean rooms took that concept to a whole new level.
Yeah, I have a vague idea of what a clean room is, but can you explain it?
Sure. It's basically a space that's designed to control every aspect of the environment. Air quality, temperature, humidity, even the number of particles that are allowed in the air. They're used for manufacturing processes that are really sensitive to contamination.
Like, those scenes in movies where the scientists are in full-body suits working with these delicate materials.
Exactly. And those suits, by the way, are another example of the growing emphasis on personnel training and hygiene in GMP. Because even the cleanest room, it won't stay clean if the people aren't properly trained and following these strict hygiene protocols.
That makes sense. Now, one of our YouTube sources, EU GMP Annex 1 Revision 2022 Implementation, they talk about the importance of air classifications in clean rooms. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. So basically, there are different levels of clean when we're talking about air. In this source, they mention how clean room classifications have evolved over time, becoming much stricter. For example, we've gone from D-ISO 8 class 100,000 to classifications that allow far fewer particles in the air.
So as technology advanced, they were able to create cleaner and cleaner environments, minimizing the risk of contamination. What about outside of the clean rooms? Were there regulations for the rest of the facility?
Absolutely. CFR Title 21, Part 211 outlines the requirements for ventilation, air quality, pest control in all pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities. It's not just about the clean rooms, it's about ensuring this controlled environment throughout the entire facility.
Okay, so all this attention to detail in facility design was a major step forward in GMP. What about the equipment used in these facilities?
Well, as the manufacturing processes became more complex, so did the equipment. One source, Pharmaceutical Master Validation Plan, mentions lyophilizers. These are machines that are used for freeze-drying pharmaceuticals.
Freeze-drying, what's the purpose of that?
So, freeze-drying, or lyophilization, it's a process that removes water from a product to preserve it and increase its shelf life. It's often used for pharmaceuticals to make them more stable. But this type of equipment, it introduces new challenges for GMP compliance.
What kind of challenges?
Well, lyophilizers, they require very specific operating conditions and meticulous maintenance to function correctly. Any malfunction could affect the final drug product, and this is where the concepts of qualification and validation become really important.
Okay, let's break those terms down. What do qualification and validation mean in the context of GMP?
Sure. So qualification is basically demonstrating that a piece of equipment is suitable for its intended purpose, while validation is about proving that a process using that equipment consistently produces the desired results.
So you're making sure that the equipment is up to the task and that the process it's used for is reliable and repeatable.
Exactly. And this isn't just a one-time thing. Equipment and processes, they need to be regularly requalified and revalidated just to make sure they continue to meet GMP standards.
I can see how this would be critical for something like a lyophilizer, where even slight variations in temperature or pressure could affect the quality of the final product.
Absolutely. And these requirements for qualification and validation are all outlined in detail in CFR Title 21, Part 211.
Okay, so GMP evolved to include not just the physical environment, but also the procedures to make sure that the environment and equipment were consistently up to par.
Precisely. And as you might guess, this also led to a much greater emphasis on the people involved in the manufacturing process, because ultimately it's people who operate the equipment and carry out those validated processes.
That's a great point. It's not just about the machines, it's about the people who run them. What kind of changes did we see in terms of personnel requirements?
Well, the early regulations, as we talked about, they mainly focused on basic hygiene, hand washing, appropriate garments, preventing contamination from personal items. But as GMP evolved, training requirements expanded beyond just basic hygiene to include specialized knowledge and skills.
What kind of specialized training are we talking about?
Well, it really depends on the specific role and the complexity of the manufacturing process. It could include training on how to operate specific equipment, understanding standard operating procedures, or SOPs, or even in-depth knowledge of the scientific principles behind the whole manufacturing process.
Right, so the idea is to make sure that everyone involved understands not just the how, but also the why of what they're doing.
Exactly. And this emphasis on training is really clearly stated in CFR Title 21, Part 211, which requires documented training programs for everyone involved in drug production.
Documented training programs. Why the focus on documentation?
Documentation is super crucial for GMP compliance. It provides evidence that processes are being followed correctly, that personnel are adequately trained, and that any deviations from procedures are identified and addressed.
So it's a way of ensuring accountability and traceability at every step.
Exactly. And this documentation, it goes beyond just training records. It includes things like batch records, logs, and those SOPs I mentioned. Basically, if it's important to the manufacturing process, it needs to be documented.
To give our listeners a sense of just how meticulous this documentation can be, one of our YouTube sources, Annual GMP Refresher Training 2022, shares an anecdote about the strictness of record keeping.
Oh yeah, I remember that one. The source mentioned that even the color of ink used for documentation can be specified in the procedures.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
It really highlights the level of detail and rigor involved in GMP compliance. But all this documentation, I mean, it must have been a logistical nightmare before computers.
It definitely was. Early GMP relied really heavily on paper-based systems, which were time-consuming and prone to errors. But as technology advanced, electronic systems started to play a bigger role in documentation.
Right, because computers should, in theory, make it easier to store, manage, and retrieve all those records.
You would think so, right? But this transition to electronic systems, it brought its own set of challenges, particularly when it comes to data integrity.
Data integrity, what does that mean in this context?
Well, data integrity is about making sure that electronic records are complete, accurate, and trustworthy. It means preventing unauthorized access, modifications, or deletions of data. Basically making sure those electronic records are just as reliable as their paper-based counterparts.
I see. So even with the shift to digital, maintaining the integrity and reliability of records is still a major concern.
Absolutely. And one of our sources, 21 CFR 111 GMP Laboratory Overview from EAS Consulting Group, highlights the challenges of maintaining data integrity in electronic systems.
Like what kinds of challenges?
Well, electronic systems are vulnerable to things like hacking and cyber attacks, which could compromise the data integrity. And then there are also challenges in validating those systems themselves to ensure they're functioning correctly and generating reliable data.
It's fascinating how GMP had to adapt to address the challenges and opportunities presented by new technologies. It's not just about the rules, it's about how those rules are implemented and enforced.
You're right, and this adaptability is one of the key characteristics of GMP. It's this constantly evolving framework, always striving to ensure that manufacturing processes are safe and effective.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground so far, from early sanitation practices to clean rooms and this complex electronic documentation. It's amazing to see how much GMP has changed over the years.
It's a real testament to the commitment to ensuring the safety and quality of the products we use every day.
And this journey, it isn't over yet. From what I've seen in these sources, there's another major shift on the horizon, one that takes GMP beyond just following the rules, into this realm of proactive risk management.
You're talking about quality by design, or QBD.
That's the one. Now, I have to admit, this concept is a bit more abstract than, say, making sure there are no insect larvae in our food. Can you explain it?
Of course. Quality by design is about building quality into a product and the manufacturing process right from the beginning. It's about understanding the science behind the product, identifying potential risks, and then designing the process to proactively mitigate those risks.
So it's not just about reacting to problems when they happen, but anticipating and preventing them.
Exactly. And this is a significant change in how we think about GMP. It's about going beyond just following a checklist and moving towards this more holistic understanding of quality.
Which source was it that mentioned this QBD approach?
One of our sources that explores this in detail is Quality Risk Management in the FDA-Regulated Industry by Jose Rodriguez Perez. It does a really good job of explaining the concept of QBD as this modern approach to GMP.
I'm really curious to hear more about how this QBD approach works in practice. What are some of the key elements involved?
One of the most critical aspects is risk assessment. This involves systematically identifying potential hazards or risks associated with the product and the manufacturing process.
So you're thinking out everything that could potentially go wrong and how likely it is to happen.
Precisely. And once you've identified those risks, you need to evaluate their potential impact. on the product's quality and safety.
So figuring out how serious the consequences would be if that risk were to occur.
Exactly. And then, based on this risk assessment, you develop control strategies to either eliminate the risk entirely or minimize its likelihood and impact.
So you're putting measures in place to prevent the risk from happening in the first place, or to reduce its effects if it does happen.
Precisely. And this could involve a whole range of different approaches, from modifying the manufacturing process itself to implementing rigorous testing and monitoring procedures.
I can see how this kind of a proactive approach would be especially valuable in pharmaceutical manufacturing, where even small deviations from the process could have really serious consequences.
Absolutely. QBD is all about ensuring that that final drug product is consistently safe, effective, and meets its intended quality attributes.
And from what I understand, this QBD approach goes hand in hand with another key concept, process validation.
You're absolutely right. Process validation is a core element of GMP, and it becomes even more important with the adoption of QBD.
Okay, just remind us again what process validation is all about.
It's basically demonstrating with scientific evidence that a specific process will consistently produce a product that meets its predetermined specifications.
So you're proving that the process is reliable and produces the desired results time after time.
Precisely. And with QBD, process validation becomes more than just a series of tests at the end of the process. It's integrated throughout the entire development and manufacturing life cycle.
I see. So you're using the knowledge gained from risk assessments and QBD principles to design a validation strategy that's really targeted and effective.
Exactly. And this could involve a whole range of tests and analyses depending on the product and process.
One of our sources, CFR Title 21, Part 211, talks about examples of tests like dissolution time, bioburden testing, and tablet weight variation.
Those are all good examples. Dissolution time, for example, it measures how quickly a drug dissolves in the body, which is essential for its absorption and effectiveness. Bioburden testing assesses the level of microorganisms present in a product or material. And tablet weight variation is about making sure that each tablet contains a consistent amount of the active ingredient.
So process validation is about making sure that every step in the manufacturing process is controlled and produces high-quality products that meet their specifications.
Exactly. It's a fundamental part of GMP, and its importance only grows as we move towards more complex products and processes.
So we've seen how GMP evolved from basic sanitation to facility design, equipment, personnel training, documentation, and now proactive risk management and process validation. What a journey.
It really has. It's a journey that continues to this day. The world of manufacturing is constantly changing, with new technologies, new products, new challenges emerging all the time.
And speaking of the wider world, there's one final piece of the GMP puzzle we need to talk about. International harmonization.
Yes. As products and companies become more global, the need for consistent GMP standards across borders becomes really important.
So it's about ensuring that a drug manufactured in, say, Europe meets the same quality standards as a drug manufactured in the United States.
Exactly. International harmonization of GMP standards is crucial for several reasons. It helps ensure the safety and quality of products, no matter where they're manufactured or sold. And it also levels the playing field for companies operating in different countries. They don't have to meet this patchwork of different regulations.
That makes sense. So harmonization really streamlines things for everyone involved.
It does. And one of the key players in this international harmonization effort is the International Council for Harmonization, or ICH.
I've heard of ICH. Remind me what they do.
The ICH is a collaborative effort between regulatory authorities and the pharmaceutical industry from different countries. Their goal is to develop these harmonized guidelines for the development, registration, and safety monitoring of pharmaceuticals.
So they're trying to create this global set of standards that everyone can agree on.
Exactly. And they've made significant progress in harmonizing GMP requirements across different regions.
Can you give us some examples of those harmonized guidelines?
Sure. We have several sources that mention specific ICH guidelines. For example, there's Q9 on quality risk management, which, ties into that QBD approach we were talking about earlier.
Right, so that's about building quality into the process right from the start. What else is there?
There's also Q3B, which focuses on limiting potentially harmful elemental impurities in drug products. And then there's Q4B, which deals with the interchangeability of pharmacopoeial texts.
Pharmacopoeial texts. What are those?
Pharmacopoeias are these official publications that contain standards for drug substances and products. And Q4B aims to make sure that those standards are consistent across different regions. which makes it easier for companies to comply with GMP requirements globally.
So these ICH guidelines are really a major step towards this unified global framework for GMP.
They absolutely are, and this international collaboration is crucial for ensuring that patients around the world have access to safe, effective, and high-quality products.
We've covered a lot of ground today in this deep dive into the history of GMP, from those early sanitation concerns to the rise of clean rooms and sophisticated equipment, the adoption of QBD, and the push for international harmonization. It's been quite a journey.
It really has, and it highlights this constant evolution of GMP in response to new challenges, scientific advancements, and an unwavering commitment to patient safety.
And even with all this progress, I'm wondering what the future holds for GMP, what new challenges and opportunities are out there.
That's a great question, and it's one that experts in the field are thinking about right now.
Well, I, for one, am really interested to see what the next chapter in the GMP story holds. It's clear that this commitment to quality and safety is more important now than ever, especially with all the advancements in medicine and technology that are happening today.
I think you've hit on a really crucial point. With personalized medicine and innovative therapies rapidly emerging, the GMP landscape is going to change.
Okay, so, like concrete examples, what are some of these new challenges and opportunities that you're talking about?
Well, personalized medicine, for instance, it aims to tailor treatments to individual patients based on their unique genetic makeup and other factors.
So it's about moving away from this one-size-fits-all approach to medicine and creating treatments that are specifically designed for each person.
Exactly. And while this has huge promise for improving patient outcomes, it also presents big challenges for GMP.
Like how so?
Well, think about it. Traditional drug manufacturing involves producing large batches of these identical products. Personalized medicine, on the other hand, might involve manufacturing small batches, even individualized doses of these highly specific therapies.
That sounds incredibly complex from a manufacturing standpoint. It's like going from mass production to a highly customized, almost craft-like approach.
It is. It requires a level of precision and flexibility that really challenges those traditional GMP approaches. Things like contamination control, process validation, and even documentation become much more critical when you're dealing with these individualized therapies.
Right, because any error could have major consequences for the patient. That's receiving that personalized treatment. There's very little room for mistakes.
Exactly. And this is where advancements in manufacturing technologies like automation and continuous processing might play a key role.
So leveraging technology to enhance precision and reduce the potential for human error. It sounds like the factories of the future are going to be incredibly sophisticated.
They are. And another emerging field that's pushing the boundaries of GMP is cell and gene therapy.
That's another area I've heard a lot about lately. What exactly are cell and gene therapies?
So they involve using cells or genes to treat or prevent diseases. It's a revolutionary approach that has the potential to cure conditions that were previously untreatable.
It sounds almost like science fiction. But I know it's a real and rapidly growing field.
It is. But these therapies, they're very complex to manufacture. They often involve manipulating living cells, which adds a whole new level of complexity to GMP.
In what way?
Well, living cells are inherently more variable than traditional drug substances. They require really specific and tightly controlled environments to grow and function properly.
I imagine that makes contamination control even more challenging.
Right.
You're not just dealing with inert ingredients anymore.
Exactly. And there are unique considerations around things like chain of custody and traceability, making sure those cells are handled and processed correctly at every step.
So GMP has to adapt to address these unique challenges and ensure the safety and quality of these innovative therapies. It sounds like regulators and manufacturers are going to have to work really closely together to figure this all out.
Precisely. And regulatory agencies around the world are working to develop guidance and standards for cell and gene therapy manufacturing. It's a rapidly evolving field, and GMP has to evolve right along with it.
It's fascinating to see how GMP is constantly adapting to keep pace with these advancements. It's a reminder that these regulations, they're not static. They're constantly changing to address new challenges and opportunities.
It really is, and I think this adaptability is one of the most remarkable things about GMP. It's this constantly evolving framework that's always striving to ensure the safety and quality of the products we all rely on.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to touch on something that's been on my mind. Throughout this whole deep dive into GMP history, it seems like GMP is about so much more than just following a set of rules.
You're absolutely right. At its core, GMP is really about a mindset. It's about a commitment to quality, a dedication to continuous improvement, and a recognition that patient safety is paramount.
It's about creating a culture where everyone involved in the manufacturing process understands the importance of their role, and they take responsibility for maintaining those high standards. It's not just about checking boxes, it's about understanding the why behind those checks.
That's a great way to put it. GMP is about fostering a culture of quality that permeates every aspect of an organization.
And that's something that goes beyond just ticking boxes on a checklist. It's about understanding why these regulations exist and why they're so important. It's about taking pride in the work you do and understanding how that work impacts the lives of others.
Precisely. And I think this mindset is what ultimately drives the ongoing evolution of GMP. It's this constant striving to do better, to be more innovative, and to always prioritize the safety and well-being of the people who use those products that are being manufactured.
Well said. Now, as we reach the end of our historical journey, I can't help but wonder, what will be the next big game changer in the GMP landscape? What's next?
That's the million-dollar question. But if history is any indication, it's likely to be driven by a convergence of factors: new technologies, evolving scientific understanding, and perhaps most importantly, a continued commitment to pushing the boundaries of what's possible in medicine and healthcare.
It's exciting to think about the future. But before we get too carried away with speculation, let's bring this back to our listeners. Why should they care about the history and future of GMP? What's the takeaway here? Why does this matter to them?
That's a crucial point. GMP might seem like a very technical, behind-the-scenes kind of topic, but it has a direct impact on everyone's lives. It affects all of us every day.
How so?
Well, think about all the products you use daily: medications, food, cosmetics, medical devices. GMP plays a role in making sure all of these products are safe, effective, and meet quality standards. It's kind of like the invisible hand that protects us.
It's about protecting public health, ensuring that the things we use every day won't harm us. It's about peace of mind.
Exactly. And as consumers, we have a right to expect that the products we use have been manufactured to the highest standards.
So understanding GMP, even just a little bit, empowers us to make more informed choices about the products we buy and to advocate for continued improvements in manufacturing practices.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that quality and safety aren't just the responsibility of manufacturers and regulators, but a shared responsibility that we all have a stake in.
Well said. Now, before we sign off, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. We've talked about the evolution of GMP, but what about its limits? Are there inherent limitations to regulating quality and safety? Especially as products and technologies become increasingly complex, it makes you wonder, can regulations really keep up with innovation?
Ooh, that's a really thought-provoking question, and I think it gets to the heart of the challenges and opportunities facing GMP in the years to come. Is it even possible to create a regulatory framework that can truly keep pace with innovation? Or are there limits to how much we can predict and control?
It's a question without easy answers, but it's a conversation worth having as we navigate this ever-evolving landscape of manufacturing and innovation. As technology advances and we push the boundaries of what's possible, the role of GMP becomes even more crucial.
I couldn't agree more. So to our listeners, we leave you with that question. As you go about your day, think about the products you use, the medications you take, the food you eat, and consider the unseen forces, like GMP, that work to ensure your safety and well-being. It's a fascinating world behind the scenes, and one that deserves our attention and understanding.
Yeah, it feels like we're really on the edge of like a whole new era in medicine and manufacturing, and GMP is right there at the forefront.
I think you're right. That's a really crucial point. With personalized medicine and all these innovative therapies popping up, the GMP landscape is definitely going to have to adapt.
So can you give us like some concrete examples? What are some of these challenges and opportunities you're talking about?
Well, take personalized medicine, for example. It aims to tailor treatments to individual patients, based on their genes and other unique factors.
So moving away from that one-size-fits-all approach
Yeah.
to medicine
Yeah.
and creating treatments that are designed just for them.
Exactly. And while this holds so much promise, for better patient outcomes, it also presents significant challenges for GMP.
How so?
Well, just think about it. Traditional drug manufacturing, it's all about producing large batches of identical products. But with personalized medicine, you might be manufacturing very small batches, maybe even like individual doses of these very specific
That
therapies.
sounds so complex from a manufacturing perspective. It's like going from mass production to this like highly customized, almost craft-like approach.
It is. It requires this level of precision and flexibility that really challenges, traditional GMP. Things like contamination control, process validation, documentation, they all become even more important when you're dealing with these individualized therapies.
Right. Because any error could have these huge consequences. For the patient
Yeah.
who's getting that specific treatment, there's not much room for mistakes.
Exactly. And this is where we might see these new manufacturing technologies play a role. Things like automation, continuous processing.
So using technology to be more precise and to reduce the potential for, human error. It sounds like the factories of the future are going to be really sophisticated.
Absolutely. And another field that's really pushing GMP is cell and gene therapy.
Yeah, that's another one I've been hearing a lot about. What exactly are cell and gene therapies?
Well, basically, they use cells or genes to treat or prevent diseases. It's a pretty revolutionary approach. It could potentially cure diseases that, we couldn't treat before.
It sounds almost like science fiction, but I know it's real and it's growing fast.
It is. But these therapies are incredibly complex to manufacture. You're often working with living cells, which introduces a whole other level of complexity for GMP.
Like how?
Well, living cells, they're just inherently more variable than traditional drug substances, and they need very specific, tightly controlled environments to grow and to work properly.
So contamination control must be even more important because you're not just dealing with like inert ingredients anymore.
Exactly. And then you have to think about chain of custody and traceability. You have to make sure those cells are handled and processed correctly every step of the way.
So GMP has to adapt to address these challenges,
Yeah.
to ensure the safety and quality of these new therapies. It sounds like regulators and manufacturers are going to have to work really closely to figure it out.
You're right. And regulatory agencies all over the world are working on this. They're developing guidance and standards for cell and gene therapy manufacturing. It's a rapidly evolving field, and GMP is evolving too.
It's amazing how GMP has to constantly adapt to keep up with all these advancements. It reminds you that regulations aren't set in stone. They're always changing to address new challenges and opportunities.
Definitely. And I think this adaptability is one of the most impressive things about GMP. It's a framework that is constantly evolving, always striving to ensure that the manufacturing processes are safe and effective.
Before we wrap up, I want to go back to something that's been on my mind. Throughout this whole deep dive into GMP history, it seems like GMP is more than just rules.
You're absolutely right. I mean, at its core, GMP is really about a mindset. It's about a commitment to quality, a dedication to continuous improvement, and of course, a recognition that patient safety comes first.
It's about creating this whole culture, right, where everybody in the manufacturing process understands how important their role is, and they take responsibility for keeping those high standards.
Yeah.
It's not just about checking boxes, but understanding why you're checking them.
That's a great way to put it. It's about fostering this whole culture of quality that's in every part of an organization.
And that's something that goes beyond just ticking boxes on a checklist. It's about a deeper understanding of why those regulations are there and why they're so important. It's about having pride in what you do and knowing that your work impacts other people's lives.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think this mindset is what keeps GMP evolving. This constant striving to do better, to innovate, and to always put the safety and well-being of the people who use those products first.
That's a great point. So now that we're kind of at the end of our historical journey here, I can't help but wonder what will be the next big thing? What's coming down the line for GMP?
That's the million-dollar question. But if we look at history, it'll probably be driven by a few things. New technologies, a better understanding of science, and most importantly, this commitment to pushing the boundaries of what's possible in medicine and healthcare.
It's exciting to think about what the future holds. But before we go too far down that road, let's bring it back to our listeners. Why should they care about the history and future of GMP? What are they taking away from this? Why does this matter to them?
That's such a crucial point. GMP might seem like this technical behind-the-scenes topic, but it really does have a direct impact on everyone. It affects all of us every single day.
In what way?
Think about it. All the products we use every day, our medications, our food, cosmetics, medical devices. GMP is there making sure all of those products are safe, effective, and meet quality standards. It's like this invisible force that protects us.
It's about protecting public health, making sure the things we use every day aren't going to harm us, It's about peace of mind.
Absolutely. And as consumers, we deserve to know that the products we buy have been manufactured to the highest standards.
So even understanding a little bit about GMP helps us make informed decisions about the products we buy.
Yeah.
And we can advocate for better manufacturing practices.
Exactly. It's realizing that quality and safety aren't just the responsibility of manufacturers and regulators, but a shared responsibility that we all have a part in.
Well said. Now, before we wrap up completely, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. We talk about how GMP evolved, but what about its limits? Are there limits to regulating quality and safety? Especially as products and technologies get more complex, it makes you wonder, can regulations really keep up with innovation?
Wow, that's a great question. I think that question gets at the heart of the challenges and opportunities facing GMP, as we move forward. Is it even possible to create regulations that can truly keep pace with innovation? Or are there limits to how much we can predict and control?
That's a tough question, without easy answers. But it's a conversation we need to have as we navigate this ever-changing world of manufacturing and innovation. As technology changes and we push the limits of what's possible, GMP's role becomes even more critical.
I completely agree. So, listeners, we'll leave you with that thought. As you go about your day, think about the products you use, the medications you take, the food you eat, and think about those things working behind the scenes, like GMP, that ensure your safety and well-being. It's a fascinating world and one that deserves our attention.
It really is. And it makes you realize how connected we all are through the products we use.
Absolutely. And as we enter this new age of, scientific discoveries and technological wonders, the role of GMP will be more crucial than ever. It's that bridge between innovation and safety.
And it sounds like the future of GMP might be less about those strict checklists and more about creating a culture of quality, a mindset of continuous improvement.
I think that's a great point. It's about building an environment where everyone, from the scientists to the factory workers, understands how important quality and safety are.
Because in the end, GMP is about protecting people. It's about making sure the medicines we take, the food we eat, the devices we use, they're all made to the highest possible standards.
That's what it's all about. And as consumers, we benefit from those high standards every day. We might not even realize it. It's easy to forget about those rigorous processes that make sure everything is safe and high quality.
It's like this silent promise happening in the background, a promise to keep us healthy and safe.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to understand GMP, even a little bit. It gives us a peek into that world, a world that's working to make sure the things we use are safe and effective.
So as we finish up this deep dive into GMP history, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
I think it's this. GMP is more than just rules. It reflects our values. It's about quality, safety, and always getting better. It's a reminder that even with all these technologies and fast-paced changes, we can't lose sight of the human element. And that's something worth thinking about.
That's a great point to end on. Thanks for taking this journey with me. Through the world of GMP, it's been great.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has sparked your interest and given you a new appreciation for all those things working to protect us. Until next time, keep being curious, keep exploring, and remember that quality matters.
And that's a wrap on the deep dive.
Yeah, it really makes you think about how connected we are through all the stuff we use.
It does. And as we, keep moving into this era of new discoveries and amazing technology, GMP becomes even more important. It's that connection between new ideas and keeping people safe.
And it sounds like, the future of GMP, maybe it's not so much about those strict rules, but about building this culture of quality, this idea of always improving.
Yeah, I think that's a key point. It's about creating that environment, where everyone involved, the scientists, the people on the factory floor, everyone gets how important quality and safety are.
Because when you really get down to it, GMP is about protecting people. It's about making sure the medicines we rely on, the food we eat, all the devices we use, they're all made to the highest standards.
Exactly. And as consumers, we benefit from that every single day, whether we realize it or not. It's easy to forget about all the hard work that goes into making sure things are safe and high quality.
It's like this unspoken promise happening behind the scenes to keep us healthy and safe.
That's a great way to put it. And that's why understanding GMP, even just a little bit, is so powerful. It lets us see into that world, the world that's dedicated to making sure everything we use is safe and works how it's supposed to.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the history of GMP, what's the main thing you'd want our listeners to take away?
I'd say it's this. GMP is more than just a bunch of rules. It's a reflection of what we value. It shows how much we care about quality, safety, and always trying to get better. It reminds us that even in a world of crazy technology and constant change, we can't forget about the human element. And that's something to think about.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks so much for coming on the show and talking about the world of GMP. It's been fascinating.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has piqued your interest and given you a new appreciation for the unsung heroes working to keep us safe. Until next time, keep asking questions, stay curious, and remember, quality matters.
That's a wrap on the deep dive.